o'clock for a national finance call. We have a very full agenda today, so I will try and keep things going at my normal pace. So hopefully that will allow us to keep to the 3 hours we've got allotted rather than go into your evenings. So have we any new declarations of interest? Could you please raise a digital hand if you do? Okay, I can't see any digital hands being raised. The minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of May, were colleagues happy with the accuracy of those minutes? If you weren't, could you please raise a digital hand? I can't see any digital hands raised, so I will duly sign them as an accurate record. If we can go to page 24 of the pack, we have the actions arising. Sorry, Pat, did you want to make a point on the minutes?
No, it's okay, Russell, thanks. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So in terms of the matters arising, which are on page 24, the first was regarding the annual schedule of business and to explore the possibilities of an introductory council of meeting to coincide with the start of the new governors in the spring of next year, and that's been arranged for the 17th of March. Thank you, Meg. And then on the patient portal group update, to take the concerns raised to the next meeting of the patient portal group. I'm sure you did that, Pat. Thank you. And to arrange for a demonstration of the patient portal for governors, and that's been booked for the 11th of November. Now, the patient portal is something we've introduced over the last few months, and I'm sure Glenn will agree with me, has been working well for us and has had a high level of take-up. As a trust, we are, through the digital hub that we have in Stratford Hospital, doing some really pathfinding work on how to bring digital solutions to the healthcare challenges of our citizens to life. And certainly when we are able to meet physically together, I would like the Council of Governors to meet in the digital hub. I know some of you have visited it because it is doing some great stuff. So moving on then to our first piece of substance. The first was the external audit report for last year, and delighted that Ian's joining us. Ian, we're in your hands.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. That's very helpful. I was going to try and share screen, but maybe in the interest of technology be letting me down, I'll just run through the key points for governors, and you can ask me any questions that you might have. I'm very pleased to report that yesterday we reported our auditor's annual report to the audit committee. That report concluded that we had issued an unqualified opinion on the financial statements of the trust, which is exactly where you would want to be. So there were no qualifications on the opinion. We also concluded that we had not identified any significant weaknesses in the trust's arrangements to secure value for money. That's very important. This year we had a new responsibility to report on the trust's arrangements to secure value for money. That guidance is issued by the NAO and we have to report on that, and we did so yesterday, and I'm very pleased that there weren't any significant weaknesses identified. That is not the case across the NHS. There were a number of my clients where there were significant weaknesses identified, so that puts you in that top category. And the audit committee said, well, what does that mean? You know, how good are we compared to the others? And I said, well, you know, there's lots of good practice going on. As everything, there's some areas to improve, but overall, you're in that top category with no major concerns from us. So I think that's really important for you to understand. And that detailed report will be published alongside the annual report and accounts as they're laid before Parliament, probably later this week or early next week. And then they will go into the public domain. We've also issued a certificate which issues the completion of the audit, and that allows the laying to happen and allows you to publish everything and allows the AGM and everything to go ahead. So that is all done. So really, in summary, a very successful process we've gone through with great cooperation from the trust to come to, I guess, the best outcome that you could have, which is an unqualified opinion and no issues in relation to your value for money conclusion. So a very pleasing year, very great results really for the trust.
Ian, thank you very much, and great to have you on board. As Chair of Audit, Rosemary, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think Ian sums up everything very well. You know, it's good to have that final opinion with the value for money.
Okay, great. Thank you. So questions or perspectives from colleagues? Mary Malloy?
Yeah, just to say to Ian, I'm not sure whether Meg's been in touch. Some of the governors have requested that we have a separate session with the external auditors so we can more understand what you do, and particularly when there's some of the new governors. So I think Meg is going to be trying to organise that for us in coming months.
Okay.
I'd be delighted. Yeah, sounds really good.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll get on to that. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. And any other questions or perspectives? Okay, well, Ian, can I just thank you and Mo and all of your team for their hard work, and Kim for the hard work of your team, which goes on to make it all happen as well. So thank you very much. Take care, look after the puppy, and hopefully it won't chew too much of your furniture. So we then move on to the assurance items bit of the Council of Governors. And these are where governors have requested assurance on particular issues as they're sort of looking at the trust and the near term. So the first is our winter and cancer plans. Glenn, you're going to handle this on Helen's behalf?
So Anne's going to do it. Actually, I could do the winter weather forecast, but no, Anne's going to do the capacity update based on actually what went to the board last time. So
yeah,
over to you, Anne.
Thanks, Glenn. So we'll start with winter. So the board of directors on the 1st of September reviewed two really key documents. First of all, we reviewed the winter flu and the COVID vaccine plan for 21-22. The key headlines there in terms of that paper were for flu, offering it to 100% of staff and aim to have vaccinated 85%. We've also been asked to prepare for phase 3 of the COVID vaccination programme. There's a detailed plan created and shared. It's available in the public domain, and that was noted and approved by Board of Directors. Helen then took us through, as part of our annual cycle, the operational capacity and winter plan. 3 different scenarios were presented in that. The worst case scenario is a shortfall of 160 beds, and best case 40 beds. And then sort of the sense that the most likely, based on the modelling assumptions, was a 100 bed gap. And in that bed modelling assumption, it works on the premise of a 92% occupancy rate. The paper then took us through the opportunities that's available to us to close that gap in capacity. And there was a very long list and a lot of information detailed within the report. And I know a number of you took time to review and to comment on that. So there's opportunities first around service improvements, the reduction of emergency length of stay. We've seen that increase slightly by half a day, and Helen took us through some of the challenges in the domiciliary care market and the plans underway to mitigate those risks. We also heard about the escalation of medical bed capacity, and that capacity is available to us currently and open on Squire Ward. We also considered the ITU capacity, paediatric capacity, theatre capacity. So it was very much an all-encompassing paper. It included the work underway around the right sizing of community capacity. And sort of focus on the community, particularly at the moment, around the investment in admission prevention and the work underway there. And so the assessment, taking into consideration all of those plans, was still a gap, but bearing in mind it's modelled at 92% occupancy, there was a gap of just over 25 beds. So Helen then took us through and shared with us the outputs from the points prevalence study. This is an annual piece of work that considers at a point in time people who are in our hospital beds, and it was broken down based on the schemes that sort of set out the system opportunity, the place opportunity, and how our plans and knowing how well we're doing, it will be monitored over this period. She also provided an update on the scheme updates as of August, so how confident and where we were in closing those bedded gaps. I have to say, this is always a moving feast. So it's something that is kept very, very much under review, as we're seeing also the impact of what happens in other areas potentially impact on the plans that we're creating. But it was a very assuring picture, a lot of detail, a lot of thought, a lot of engagement has gone into to creating our winter plan, as we do every year. And work underway then to monitor and understand and take account, particularly of things like the domiciliary care capacity, which has affected some of our discharges, and the work underway to mitigate that. So that plan was also received and approved by Board of Directors on the 1st of September. So I'll pause at that point for any questions on the winter, on our preparedness for winter.
No, thank you very much, Anne. I think it is fair to say that we are concerned about the impact, not just on domiciliary care, but on care homes, of the potential capacity implications of the double vaccination requirement from the 11th of November. I personally think this is something that could cause major issues for us in terms of bed blocking and the impact on flow. For us to be safe and effective during the winter period, we need the system to flow. Glenn, is there anything you'd like to add on that, first of all?
Yeah, I was going to add the point that you've just made, Russell, actually, and obviously one of the other things that we potentially might see is a similar law applicable to NHS staff. So we'd need to prepare ourselves for that potentially. I mean, Anne's covered it all off. I mean, just to say this is, and sometimes I feel like I say this every year, but this is going to be the toughest winter that we faced. The unpredictability, I think, of demand is probably one of the more significant things, both in terms of the community capacity to discharge into, but also, you know, the levels of COVID, the levels of flu that we can expect to see. COVID is now endemic rather than pandemic. We've got about 11 patients in the hospital today, and that's been a kind of steady state. But I think we can expect to see that throughout this winter period, but we can expect to see flu alongside that. And obviously we need to continue to separate the treatment of those patients who are suspected COVID from those who aren't, and that provides additional capacity concerns. But as Anne said, I mean, there's a good list of actions. There's a kind of a marginal gains theory of doing lots of things that improve our flow. The one thing I would add to that is Anne mentioned the critical care capacity. There is some additional funding that's been announced very recently on that. We are looking at that. Probably the best thing to do is to create respiratory support unit capacity rather than additional critical care, to allow patients to step down from critical care into supported acute beds. And that's what we are modelling, certainly at Warwick and in other parts of the group. Also, staffing is a challenge. So we're obviously at the end of the summer holiday period. We've had staff self-isolating. We'd already got a workforce challenge going into COVID. So that's another area that we're working hard on to recruit, particularly to front door to A&E and MAU areas. So we're working on contingency plans for that now. That's all I'd add.
Thank you, Glenn. And other perspectives, Michael Coker, please.
Yes, actually, if I heard it right, I think you said vaccination at a rate of about 85%. Is there any particular reasons for the fact that that 15% isn't vaccinated, or perhaps prepared to be vaccinated?
That really allows for maternity leave, sickness, and other factors. But it's important that we've offered all of those staff that. So really that's so we may have turnover of staff who leave. So that 85% it factors those staff unavailability into that.
I think, Michael, there are still some people who resist. and will not change their view on that. There's still some misinformation around things like pregnancy and the risk. And I think particularly in some of the care sectors, there are some younger people who think they're going to be all right. And I think one of the messages that we've been trying to get to those is, yes, the risk of hospitalisation and mortality is significantly reduced, but actually long COVID could affect 8% of people who contract COVID, and that in itself could be debilitating for young people. And we don't know for how long. And it's really important that we get that message over, that long COVID is an issue also.
This is a problem that is not going to go away. There will be permanently a proportion of the population. There is in every country in the world, I think, apart from military states, where a proportion of the population refuse to get vaccinated. So it does become a genuine issue in an already strained social care sector. Are colleagues happy to move on to cancer? So back with you, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. So a little later in your agenda, the quarterly status update considers the safety and recovery of services following the impact of COVID, and Helen gives a position on that and rates that green at the end of Q1. That really focuses on our accelerator elective recovery, the decrease in the number of people waiting longer than 52 weeks, the 95% of priority 2 patients dated and seen within a month, and improved cancer performance. We are improving our cancer performance. This is regularly reviewed, and again later on in the agenda, the review and update from Cancer Board. And this focus is translating into those improvements. Question is around the sustainability of these improvements. I received on Friday the validated performance for July, and that continues the improvements that we'd seen in the previous 3 months. There is some concern around performance going into August and September as a result of continued high demand and reduced capacity because of annual leave and sickness. But on the positive is our 28-day performance, which continued to improve even during August. And again, just tracking our performance on a weekly basis, and we're sustaining that. And that's a really helpful indicator of all of the cancer indicators that we're on the right track. So a lot of focus at speciality level, at tumour site level, and the monitoring and reports that we receive those on a weekly basis, and I regularly update the non-execs as part of my non-exec update on the work that's underway around improving cancer performance, but it's about also the importance of sustaining that cancer performance. So some positive signs, but again, still work to do, and we will continue to keep a very robust eye on that. That's certainly one of our aspirations this year around being an exemplar cancer site. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Anne. Any questions or perspectives to Anne? I think cancer is clearly something we need to ensure we maximise the performance on behalf of the citizens that we look after. Roger?
Yes, thank you, Anne, for those comments on the cancer service. I know that we have struggled over some years at getting this as good as we would like. Can I be assured that you're not driving the staff too hard in order to achieve these numbers? Because I think the quality of the staff that we've got is excellent, but we don't want to burn them out merely to succeed in reporting a KPI that is better than most.
Yeah, it is a really good question. The plans on the tumour sites are developed with staff, and I think it's fair to say our staff are pretty impressive people, and get very annoyed if we haven't booked their lists, or get very annoyed if they've got gaps. So this is very much something we're doing we're doing this collaboratively, we're doing this as team, as a team effort. And so So I do have assurance that we're not driving people too hard, us personally driving, but people may be driving themselves quite hard because they recognise the impact of delays and what they've seen around delays, and do want to get people seen as quickly as possible. And I've got some examples of that, of where lists that are where staff are using different lists and working really hard to deal with that backlog. So I think they're pushing themselves probably far harder than we are to do the best for the populations that we serve, as Russell said. And Glenn's just put it in the chat around the investment that we made last year in additional capacity to help with cancer demand, particularly around booking and so on, to make those processes as easily and as streamlined as possible.
Thank you. That's a help.
Thanks, Roger. And Ruth?
The government is giving us some money for testing centres. Some of this money will be used, I hope, for one-stop cancer testing, perhaps.
Yeah, can you clarify on the community diagnostic hub point and that, please, Glenn?
Yeah. Hi, Ruth. I assumed it would. So the community diagnostic hub initiative nationally is about creating capacity in places rather than in systems. So we put forward a bid across Coventry and Warwickshire to create a hub in Stratford, one in Coventry and one at George Eliot for Warwickshire North. We've been successful in that. It's not been announced yet, but we've been successful in securing capital and revenue funding to expand what we have on offer in Stratford. So we'll get some more details out on that as soon as we're allowed to announce it. I think it's a political announcement about to be made on that one. That's why we haven't said anything about it. But that will be, two things. It's more capacity, but probably more importantly, it's local capacity. And we've got lots of evidence that shows that the nearer the capacity is to the individual patients' homes, the more they're going to be accessing those services.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. So if colleagues are happy to move on to the next assurance item, we'll go on to the Quality Assurance Quarterly Status Update report. Glenn?
Thank you, Russell. So this is the first outing of the quarterly status report for this year. So I'll probably just spend a little bit more time, if the chairman allows, to just step you through it. But for those of you familiar with this is the objectives that we set for the year, that we set in collaboration with you through the work that we do through roundtable events. You'll see at board that we look at this in slightly more granular detail when we do the board assurance framework, and the wording of that is slightly different, but these are the top level objectives. So on the left hand side of these pages, you've got the overall objective, and they're broken down into those headings of quality, sustainability, etc. Then the measures that we're putting in place, the outcomes that we've had and the desired outcomes, we then give a RAG rating, red, amber, green rating of each of the individuals. So just working through them, just picking out some highlights. One of the big issues actually for us at the moment is trying to work mainly with UHCW around improving tertiary services. Russell and I have had conversations with Chair and Chief Exec at UH about this also. And you'll see there we've highlighted some areas that we're seeking to improve. Probably the most important one is oncology. We've struggled for a couple of years to have sufficient consultant oncologist input to our cancer services, both at Warwick and at Stratford. And so we are working to try and find solutions to that. We're working also with George Eliot, who have a similar problem in terms of it is a hard to recruit to workforce, so we're trying to find how we can do better. So that's that one. On the next one, COVID recovery, we've already touched on this. Anne's talked about that. We've green rated that, not because we're fully recovered from COVID, but certainly compared to other organisations, other trusts, we're doing very well on this. Roger had asked a question, I think, about the number of patients that were waiting in our patch. We have been able to reduce those numbers. The numbers of patients waiting beyond 52 weeks for their treatment are significantly reduced. over the past few weeks. We do not have any 104-week waiters, which are the ones actually that nationally they're monitoring at the moment. So that kind of shows you the extent of the problem. But some really good progress on this. We were part of this national accelerator program, so we did get some additional resources to try some different things, and many of those have been successful. But as Anne said, there's some frailty around our ability to maintain this moving forward. So that's something we're working on at the moment, making sure that, as well as all the clinicians, that we've actually got booking capacity as well. And I'll talk a little bit later in the confidential section about the announcements this week and what that might entail in terms of opportunities for us. On sustainability, the urgent care review, we are seeing quite high levels of demand at the front door, higher than normal, not dramatically higher. So when we look at our performance against the 4-hour wait, it's deteriorated more so to do with flow, as Russell will often remind us. So we are looking at processes within the hospital, but also discharges out of the hospital. So the care sector is a big worry on that at the moment. We are being encouraged to look at a model which is in place in a lot of other parts of the country, which is to have more GPs streaming, as they call it, at the front door of the hospital. I've always been a little bit reluctant to do that because I have a view that GPs are better in primary care than on an acute site, and so always try to keep that balance right locally. But we are continuing to review that. We are also, as part of this work, reviewing the minor injury unit at Stratford. We have not yet reopened that following COVID because of infection prevention and staffing issues, but we will need to reopen it in some shape or form. But we're also looking at what that model is for the future. There's then a section on sustainability, a lot of work going on that. I won't go through all of it, but of course, over the last year, we've done some things that have not helped sustainability, with lots of PPE, with increasing our ventilation, with increasing respiratory support. So we're using quite a bit more carbon than we were, but it's still our aim to be a carbon neutral NHS within a few years. So we are doing our bit on that. Agile working has moved us in the other direction, with many of our staff not moving around as much as they did. But the sustainability group, the sustainability strategy that went to board sets that out. There's an informatics review going on across the group, which talk about there. There are the reforms and getting ready for integrated care systems. Lots of work going on this. That's following through its parliamentary process, which looks highly likely to result in a situation where that is law from next April. So working with CCG colleagues, tweaking our leadership structure within the organisation so that we've got execs part of the play, some execs more part of play, some execs more focused on what we're doing as an organisation, and that's something that we will update you on. What else do we need to talk about on here? And I'll try to go through every single one, but there was another one I just wanted to talk about, which is managerial and leadership capacity. We've done the portfolio update for execs this morning at Remuneration Committee. We are focusing heavily on staff wellbeing. So you see some of the things listed there around the fact that we've got a staff wellbeing advisor, the fact that we've got a permanently funded team to provide ongoing support to staff wellbeing, and there's some offers across system and national around some of the more acute presentations of mental health concerns for staff, and getting good feedback from staff that's well received by them. And then finally on digital, Russell mentioned the work of the digital hub. We were highly commended in the Health Service Journal awards last week for the MySense project, which hopefully some of you, I think we may have brought that to Council of Governors at some point, but which is about using the Internet of Things to monitor patients in the community, which is a great project. We are looking at robotic engineering. We're doing more workshops to look at the opportunities there, and hoping to get new ministers interested in what we're up to there, because the one thing you may have noticed in the announcements this week is that part of the recovery for COVID is to look at digital solutions to ensure that we innovate. So we're going to try and put some of our ideas onto that national table and see if we can get some funding to move that forward. That's all I'll go through, Russell. Happy to take any questions.
Very comprehensive description, Glenn. Any questions or perspectives to Glenn? So in a difficult year, I think the summary would be we've started pretty well. Pat, over to you.
Yes, I'd just like to say how I do hope that this initiative that with the clinical trials with MySense using AI is going to come very quickly to the rest of South Warwickshire, having just found a neighbour lying on the floor, 96 years old. He'd been on the floor all night. He couldn't reach his alarm button, and he needn't have lain there all that long if we'd have had something like that in place.
Good.
Just to say that.
Yeah, really good point. We trialled it in Warwickshire North. We've got proof of concept now. So next phase would be is a business case to roll that out more widely. And the kind of example you've given there, you know, these wearable devices that you would spot that kind of thing happening to an individual who was part of that monitoring arrangement. So yeah, it would really help. Thanks,
Pat. I do think these the use of technology to help people stay at home safer for longer is going to be very much a building block for the future of healthcare delivery. Ruth?
I don't want to be facetious. I think I've been lying around too long. But talking about GPs in A&E, I would have thought at the moment the place for GPs, we've got an awful lot of empty shops on the parade in Leamington, will be to do a clinic, an open clinic, walk-in clinic, right in the centre of the community. I think it would also be great for all the youngsters that feel awkward and embarrassed going to GPs and special clinics who've got mental health to be able to walk in.
I think that's a brilliant idea, Ruth. Can we take that away, Glenn and Anne? Because I do think that's a brilliant idea. So thank you.
Or just being more available in primary care is another option on that one as well.
Yeah, but I think Ruth's point about sort of just being able in a relaxed way, we'll take it away, and just keeping the pace going because we've got a lot to cover. Richard?
Yes, actually, on the urgent care, the problem that I think quite often happens at A&E is people going there when they could have gone somewhere else. And as an example of that, only last week I was talking to somebody locally in Kenilworth who had an eye problem which didn't need A&E, but we are supposed to have a primary care ophthalmology service in South Warwickshire, and I couldn't find anywhere where it's listed where people should go. Now it's situations like that which is the problem. You know, the CCG doesn't actually say on their website where people should go if they have eye problems. And I went through NHS Choices again on behalf of this neighbour, and there's nothing on there. So these are the things, this information is so important, and we really need to be doing these, if you like, use cases, which is a term we use in software engineering, but basically looking at situations like this and what happens and what the patient should do.
No, absolutely right, Richard. And we talked about this as a board the month before last. So we are very conscious of the fact that communication, patient-facing communication on the pathways and how to address the practical problems that they have is important. I'll move us on, guys, if that's okay, given the time. Ruth, I think you have a legacy hand up. So we'll move on to the patient experience assurance report. Fiona?
Yes, thanks, Chair. So this is unfortunately just because of the timing of and delay of this meeting. It is data from March, April, May. So happy to take questions if there's anything more up to date that people want to talk to me about. But so generally, you know, our patient experience data suggests that most of our patients have a really good experience, but we are obviously, we do in these quarterly reports give examples and cite the complaints that we do receive and the actions that we've taken to address any of those gaps. We are proud of the low number of complaints that we receive, and our continued strategy is that we have good conversations with patients and relatives and try and mitigate those to local level to stop people needing to complain, because that takes effort and anxiety in itself. You'll see in the report a number of good examples of good practice and actions that we have taken on any themes that we have. So we've put more resource in the PALS and complaints and bereavement team, which is all one team, and they work flexibly between those three functions so that there are resources there to address concerns coming in any of those routes. We've implemented the patient portal as a way of communicating and providing more information to patients, and that rollout is being really successful, and the take-up is as well. Obviously we continue to use the interpreting service, the bereavement service that has been cited previously. Really proud of our volunteers, and some of those are coming back on site, but actually those roles have had to change through COVID because of the risk assessment and the risks to those volunteers, but we're doing all we can to keep those on board because we know that they do some great work for our patients. And our staff indeed. There, in terms of things that we worried about at this point, but I can give you assurance that that has improved. We did have a decrease in the timeliness of our response to formal complaints during those 3 months. And the main reason for that was some gaps in our leadership teams in one of our divisions, but we have addressed that and put mitigations, and we are back to our normal good performance on that. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Fiona, and thank you for all your hard work and your team's hard work. Any questions to Fiona on the patient experience assurance report? Okay, thank you. So we then go into the clinical governance assurance report. Apologies, Bruce, who chairs that, is away on holiday, and David Spraggart, this is one of his clinical days. David is the non-executive director who is currently deputising for Bruce and will become chair of the clinical governance committee in due course. So I'll take the report as read, but any questions, and I'm sure between us, Fiona and I will be able to hopefully address them. Overall, an assuring picture in what is obviously difficult situations. Mary?
I just wondered, with the EPMA, and there've been a lot of problems mentioned at the Medicine Safety Committee about the EPMA and the MAU. Do we have a timescale of when we might be able to expect EPMA to be rolled out to MAU?
Fiona, do you know the answer to that? Because I don't.
I don't have an accurate one, Mary. It is still being discussed in terms of the resource and impact. I suspect it won't be before Christmas, before winter now, because the impact will be significant. And we're obviously just talking about the numbers of people coming through the organisation, and the majority of those hit MAU. And so that team is under some significant pressure in terms of workload at the moment. And to then ask them to input their prescribing into an electronic system that is new to them, it's not new to the rest of the organisation, but new to them, for 60 or 80 patients a day, will have a significant resource and implication to that workload. So we're just trying to make a good decision in terms of balance of risk there.
Yeah, I understood it was all to do with the turnover of patients that go through that unit. Yes, I understand that. Yeah, thank you.
Fiona, can you give us an update at the next Council of Governors meeting in November on that? That would be super. Thank you.
Okay.
And any other questions, colleagues? Richard?
Yes, it was mentioned, I think, was in the July clinical governance report on the Coventry and Warwickshire pathology service, saying that they are having recruitment problems. Has that had any noticeable effect in the the trusts, the treatments that the trusts have done?
Fiona, Glenn?
Glenn, do you want to come in on that?
I'm very happy for you too, Fiona.
So I think it has. Their performance in the network, particularly for some of the turnaround times, has reduced recently, and that was in the minutes of the Clinical Governance Committee, because they said that was one of the causes, and they were doing everything they could to recruit and improve that position. But that was one of their concerns, actually, and in terms of its impact.
And Glenn, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and as a consequence, I had a special invitation to our finance performance meeting yesterday, I think it was. And yeah, there are issues and we need to improve. We've got some propositions to the network that would help that, and hopefully they'll do the right thing and work them through with us.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Ruth, and then we'll move on.
Apropos pathology, which we've been moaning about actually for years, I think Glenn has said that last sentence at so many meetings. But apart from that, are we okay for plastic bottles and files?
Glenn?
What's our supply like?
So you will have picked up on this as a national problem. It is linked to the use of plastics I referred to earlier. We have a supply chain problem across the country. We are, as a consequence, some guidance has been given to all trusts and to primary care about about testing, and we are trying to avoid, for want of a better word, unnecessary blood tests. And you could argue no blood tests should be done if they're unnecessary, but there are some things like research programs that maybe could be put on hold whilst we sort the supply out. So we're okay. We're able to function as an acute provider. It's got implications for primary care more so than us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Okay, team, we'll move on then, because I'm conscious of the fact we lose Kim shortly. So, Kim, the finance assurance report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the report as read, but because I think this is the first report of the financial year that the Council of Governors have seen, so I'll just draw out some key highlights or points really that I want to draw to your attention. So the financial regime really for this financial year is very similar to last year, in the sense that payment by results at work has been suspended and it's largely a block contract. The financial settlement was also done in 2 halves, so we've only had a confirmation of the funding for the first 6 months of the year, which is referred to as H1 in the report. As I said, I've got a call at 3 o'clock around how the money that Boris has announced is going to be distributed really to the NHS. So I will hopefully find out a bit more about what H2, which is the second 6 months, will look like for us. So I'll bring a further update to you all in due course. The other thing that was announced for the first half of the year was some additional sort of incentive monies to encourage organisations to clear some of their backlog in respect to elective work, and that was called the Elective Recovery Fund. That there's some specific thresholds that we needed to achieve in monetary values as a percentage of our performance in 2019/20 that we had to achieve in order to earn this additional money. But obviously that comes with a cost in terms of delivering that activity. So those are the two sort of key things that are changed. But pleased to report, well, we then set a break-even plan for the first 6 months of the year, and it looks like we're still on track to deliver that, even with the operational and staff challenges that we are dealing with. So for the first 4 months of the year, small surplus of £37,000, and as I said, on track to deliver a break-even. Our cash position remains strong at £30 million, which again is a positive position. We've also included a lot more additional information in the report. You'll see a bit more granularity, and we've also included some really good some productivity measures, which you will find of interest, and assure you that we can continue to be productive, even though we're not generating the surpluses, really, I suppose, that as an organisation we have been used to generating in the past. But happy to take any further questions.
That's great. Thank you, Kim. Clearly things are challenging and uncertain at the moment. Any questions to Kim on the financial assurance report? I think it's fair to say that I'm concerned that we do need an element of the old payment by results sort of incentivisation to drive volumes, to get the waiting lists down, to ensure that the financial system as a whole is designed in a balanced way to address what our citizens need, which is to wait less long for their interventions. We'll move on then. Thank you, Kim. Disappear when you need to. And therefore we move on to the Finance and Performance Assurance Report from Simon. Simon?
Thank you, Russell. So you have reports from 4 Finance and Performance Committees on your papers. I won't go through them blow by blow, but what you can see is that we tend to run quite a narrow agenda on F&P to allow us to have a discussion in depth on the topics we're looking at. So over the last 4 months, we've looked at quite a number of the things that have come up already in today's commentary. Cancer, the pathology network last Tuesday, the accelerator programme, finance of course, recovery from COVID, etc., etc. And I think overall, we can give you significant assurance that there's a good grip on the key issues in the organisation from the executive leadership team. There's a strong control of the numbers and the costs. There is a real emphasis on driving improvement on performance across all the key disciplines, and within that, there's a very strong focus on productivity in both its effectiveness and efficiency guise. And my sense is that we are clearly aware of the challenges, some of which Russell has alluded to. And, we're in a difficult place with plenty of challenges, but we are doing the right things. Happy to take questions.
Very helpful summary, Simon, and thank you for your sharing of that. Questions or perspectives to Simon? Okay, I can't see any digital hands raised, so I'll move on to the next item, thank you, which is the Audit Assurance Report. Obviously heard from the auditors, which is quite helpful, Rosemary, but what would you like to pull out here?
I was actually just going to, for expediency purposes, take the reports as read because they're both quite historic and covered the financial audits which covered meetings back in May and June. So if I can just take any questions.
No, that's great. Thank you, Rosemary. Any questions to Rosemary? Please raise a digital hand. Okay, thank you. I can't see any digital hands, but thank you, Rosemary, for your hard work in chairing that subcommittee. We'll move on then to reports from representatives on projects and groups. The first up is the Ellen Badger Hospital Site Redevelopment Update Report. Mike.
Thanks, Russell. So since the last Council of Governors in May, planning application is making its way slowly through the process. Reported last time the target determination date was 4th of June. It then slipped to the 27th of August and it failed to meet that. But it's actually understood that currently this is not an unusual situation. It's nothing specifically about us. It's quite a general thing apparently. All of the work streams progressing well. Design teams continue to address any matters raised by the various groups that were consulted as part of the planning process. And it's been working on RIBA stage 4, which is the technical design. So that's the nitty gritty of exactly what the interior will be like and all the venting and stuff like that. The procurement framework, which is called Pagabo, was chosen a while ago, and Gaynor McGarry has led us through the process for actually choosing the team that will do the demolition and the rebuild. And the final qualitative review of the submitted tenders was completed on the 25th of August, with the result being very close with 2 excellent responses. And the finance teams are now looking at the prices submitted and reviewing those. Meg's looking after us on the legal work stream, which makes sure the relationship between the trust and medical centre is set up correctly. The decant of the services is progressing well. Most services have been maintained locally, so like district nurses have taken a flat in a local care home that wasn't used, so win-win for everyone. They get to stay local and have all their kit ready for them in the local place. They'll be returning to site after an 8-week closure, after the demolition takes place, and the retained building is actually sealed, where they sort of knock it off, the bit that's been knocked down. All outpatient activity ceased at the end of August, and the longer term plan is to move the inpatient beds to Campion Ward. As governors, you'll all have seen Charles's letter on the topic. Being on a building site isn't conducive to rehab. There will be a short period before the move to Campion where patients are being cared for in an alternative setting. This is due to essential maintenance work to upgrade Campion's ventilation. So that's expected to be completed by mid-November. The Swift stroke public health-led health and wellbeing work stream has started to explore in more detail how the Health and Wellbeing Centre can impact positively on public health. And to do that, it's understanding the evidence base, the most impactful actions towards improving health and wellbeing. And that builds on the JSNA work that's already been undertaken. That work's been led by Public Health Registrar Jamie Ray Tanner, and is looking at things like dementia-friendly buildings and how to pandemic-proof the building. And with that, any questions?
No, that's great. Thank you, Mike. Glenn, is there anything you want to add to the work going on at Ellen Badger?
No, it's obviously well articulated by Mike, so no, nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or perspectives on that update from Mike? Okay, I can't see any Okay, Ruth?
Well, I just wanted to ask Mike, I remember the last time that the community seemed to be not too happy with what was going on. Are they all on board now? Is Shipston happy now?
There are people who are very happy because they think the most important thing is to crack on with the medical centre and get more services back here. And I'll leave Glenn to comment on the other group.
Yeah, there has been, as we discussed before, an ongoing discussion with the League of Friends. But I think it's fair to say that there's now much more of a balance of opinion locally. I think the League of Friends were overly focused on beds, and we've not been able to confirm the future bed arrangements because of the review that we previously discussed. But the key is that we're building a brand new hospital, the first investment, the most significant investment in the site since it was first opened all those years ago, and yeah, so most people consider it's a very good news story in the round, but I think the balance has switched more in favour of let's get on with it. It's a good thing to do.
Excellent.
Joe, is there anything you'd like to add on that?
I thought I'd better make an actual appearance at this point, given that we're talking about the Ellen Badger. Yeah, I would absolutely agree that things have turned, and I'm really, really grateful that Glenn and others have banged heads together, and some sense it is appearing. There are still some nasty little notices around Shipson saying we need a hospital, which I have to resist tearing down. But apart from that, it actually, I don't know whether Mike would agree, but it seems like a very small group of people. It is just such a shame because it's such an exciting project. And, you know, this morning I was talking through some of the outdoor landscaping and whether we could have an outdoor meeting place so that we could have, you know, and the things we could, you know, we could build a sort of little, well, not a huge one, but with, you know, like a little half circle auditorium-y thing into the bank. And, you know, it's just brilliant. And actually to be able to do anything exciting at the moment is a joy. So Brian just needs to pull his head in.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Moving on then to the end of life committee update report. We have a new governor volunteer for this going forward, Michael Coker. So Michael, on behalf of the Council of Governors, thank you for volunteering, and I'm sure Fiona and others will look after you, so to speak, on what is an extremely important area. And just to record thanks again to Ruth for her work over many years on the end of life work, so thank you. Should we move on to the car park project board update report? Roger.
Thank you, Russell. I'm pleased to say that the car park is now appearing. All the groundworks are finished, and there's a lot of work that goes on that you never see. That's finished. Now construction is underway. Staircase cores are in, the lift enclosures are in, and frames, steel frames coming both from France and Poland. Those should be up by the end of September, so that, or in fact, the end of the 24th of September, so that the floor decks can be laid and ready for concreting. So things are really moving forward. It's on plan at the moment. A lot of work still to be done, but even so, we are being assured in the project group that it will be possible to open early in December. I'm waiting to see that, and hopefully at the next council in November, everyone will be able to know that we're very close to getting completion.
Great, and as Glenn said in the chat box, you can see the crane in the distance. Glenn, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, not that I look out my office window much, just to be clear on that one. But no, I mean, we actually got lucky on this project that we cracked on with it when we did, because actually the contractor that we're using, their access to steel supply is quite significant here, because it's very difficult to get a hold of steel for these kind of construction projects now. So we could have hit the buffers if we hadn't got lucky. So it's great to see it happening from my office. So it will be open to plan.
Great, super. Thank you, Glenn. Any questions to Roger or Glenn? Alan?
Yeah, just a quick one. There's a shortage of cement for concrete. Have we got away with that, or are we going to be hit with a delay?
As far as the project board has been told, all materials are secured, so that where it's coming from, I can't tell you, but I believe that we will have the necessary concrete that we need.
As long as we got it, we're lucky.
My fingers are crossed, and so far what the project board has been told has materialized. So let's hope that that keeps going.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Thank you, Alan. So we'll move on then to the Falls Group update report. David? You're on mute, David. You're on mute, David. David, we can't hear you. You're on mute. Thank you.
Sorry. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the last meeting, but and I only got the minutes yesterday. But obviously, the figures were distorted by COVID and an excessively large number of bad state patients, unstable patients. But the figures since have improved. So, and the rest was down to paperwork and procedures, which obviously are so important to make sure all the ticks and figures are entered.
Yeah,
so nothing more to enter than that, I'm afraid.
Okay. Fiona, anything more you want to add on our work on Falls? I mean, we talked about the beds earlier at the charity meeting, but your view on where we are with the Falls work?
Yeah, I think probably since the last committee, what David's right, we did have an impact in terms of COVID on our falls rate, but actually for the last 3 months, our rate per patient in our hospital has been below our target, and we have been struggling to hit our target for a while. So that's really reassuring in terms of percentage rate. The work we've concentrated on, again, David will know this, that we've struggled to get staff training as mandatory for a long time, and we've got round that by putting a competency package that they complete actually with their line manager at the patient bedside, rather than having to book on additional training and take them away from their clinical practice, which that rollout has gone really well. So I'm comfortable with our current position around Falls. I think we've done really well.
Thank you, Fiona. Any questions or perspectives on Falls? Mary?
This is a quick update that David and I have agreed that we will get Meg to email out to governors to have a deputy for David on the Falls committee, because David does have some other significant pieces of work he has to do. So it'll be good to have another governor that can stand in. So we'll be doing that in the coming week or two.
Great. So volunteers welcome. David, anything you want to add?
Can I just add, please, Russell? The next meeting is next week, and I've just received the papers for that, and the figures looking good are extremely good.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. And Jean?
Just to say, you might already know that Warwickshire County Council have funded a new post reporting to the fire service as part of our preventable hospital admissions. The person who's been appointed, I attended the committee and told them all about it, and they're really keen to hear from him. He will be attending in, I think it's October, their meeting, where we're hoping they'll all get together and be able to assist each other in reducing falls in the home. As part of our Homes Safe and Well, we do an assessment, but I think I'm keen to see that we use the same assessment in hospital and out of hospital, so we can see if people have deteriorated. So Warwickshire Council are all for helping reduce falls.
Good, great. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, David. We'll keep the pace going, team, because we've still got a lot to cover. The report from the Stroke Association, David?
Yes, thank you. I've been trying to set up a Falls programme in conjunction with the Stroke Association. Stroke victims are at double risk of falls, partly because obviously they've had a stroke, and also because generally they are elderly as well. And the problem is at the moment that nothing is done till they actually turn up an A&E, by which time it is too late. So I approached the Stroke Association to see if we could set up some sort of project to cooperate on this. They indicated that they are extremely happy to cooperate with us. Their comment was that many are very unsteady on their feet. So I then approached Anne Coyle for her suggestions. She was enthusiastic to go ahead with this, and she will provide physios from local place teams to provide therapy. This has these, sorry, I'm reading from my notes here. This has the advantage that you've then got several patients together rather than having to go out to individual payments. So on Tuesday, we had a meeting with Anne, the Stroke Association, myself, and Francine Doherty, who is the lead volunteer team, to see if we could set up such a project. Now, unfortunately, the Stroke Association have been badly hit by COVID. They've lost staff. Quite a few of their groups have closed. But I feel that the project is so important that it is important to try and set up some sort of pilot to see if this is a goer. So this is what was agreed at the end of the meeting. I've subsequently spoke to Francine Doherty, who suggested that they have volunteers who might be able to help with this. So that is the present position with the proposed project.
Thank you for that comprehensive update, and great, Anne, that you're seizing the opportunity of working with the Stroke Association. Any questions or perspectives on that? Otherwise, we'll move on. David, I think you've got a legacy hand up, but thank you for your hard work on that. So the patient experience group update report, Jane Knight.
Sorry, Russell, I didn't know I was reporting it to this group. I just report it to the patient care committee.
Okie dokie. Apologies, Jane, that wasn't made clear. But everything going okay, just generally?
As far as I know, but to be honest, I can't remember anything about it.
Honesty is always the best policy, Jane. We'll come back to it next time and
Thank you.
Make sure we provide the support to you that we need to. So moving that on to the Patient Safety Surveillance Committee update report. Jean, and again, thank you for joining us when you're suffering from COVID. It's appreciated.
Well, the meeting was last Monday, and I was on holiday on the previous meeting, and I won't have made it up because it's too bizarre. I moved a dog away from a big creature, a hornet that was on the carpet floor, and it flew up and bit me on the neck. And I thought I was going to die of pain. So I didn't attend the meeting, and then I found out I'd got COVID. So it's been a really good week. So no, I've got nothing to report, but the discharge part, yes, I have got something to report on that, but I'll do that when I get to the discharge. But what I can do, and I've been attending them, is provide assurance. It is a fantastic group and they've really got the finger on the pulse. So well done, Fiona, and all your team. That's really great.
Okay, thanks, Jean. It sounds as though we need a Jean Abersmith safety surveillance. Fiona, anything you want to add to the patient safety surveillance work or the patient experience work?
No, I don't think so. Our focus for patient experience this year is around communication, because that continues to be a persistent theme through our feedback, and so we are trialing a number of different things to help with patient communication or relative communication. And once we've trialled those, we'll implement them across the trust. We are encouraging ward managers and professional leads to attend that meeting so that they can share their best practice and really engage in and learn from each other. That's patient experience. Patient safety surveillance. Thank you, Jean, for that feedback. I wasn't there on Monday either. I was on annual leave. So, but we tend to just go through the patient safety report and pick up any actions and issues that we need to address ahead of that going to clinical governance. So we do the sort of more detailed conversation there, and it works well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Fiona. Any questions or perspectives, Mary?
Just to say that I normally deputise for Jean at that meeting, but because of the short notice and the circumstances of the emergency that arose, I wasn't able to stand in, but I didn't really get much notice. Poor Jean.
Thank you.
So,
back with you, Fiona.
Yeah, sorry, Russell. I just remembered something. So an item of discussion in my absence at Patient Safety Surveillance on Monday was the new patient safety strategy, which was launched in June. And we are just working through that, and we'll present a sort of gap analysis to clinical governance next month on where we are against that strategy. But one of the particular items that may be of interest to governors and the public is the role that is outlined in that strategy called the patient safety partner, which is a role for a member of a public or a governor to take up to support the safety team as an objective challenge, really, to investigations or safety work going forward. We're expecting a national job description on that and a national training program for those partners, so that it really enables them to be that sort of challenging critical friend. And when I have more information on that, then I will share it with governors, because I think it may well fit well with their role.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Fiona. Colleagues, happy to move on? So we'll therefore move on to the patient portal group update report. Pat.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting this. I gave a report at the last meeting and I haven't been to another patient portal meeting since.
Okay, apologies, Pat. Meg, if we can just pick up, helping governors to either be aware that they're on the agenda or that we take it off the agenda, that would be helpful. Meg, can I leave that with you, please? Thank you, Pat. We look forward to the next update to the next Council of Governors meeting. So we're then on to the Governor Induction Working Group update. Chris.
Thanks, Russell. For anyone who's got the consolidated pack, our short report starts on page 125. This group was set up by the General Purposes Committee in July to examine the subject of induction of governors with an eye on the forthcoming election round, which runs across this coming winter. So we've got going. I'm very grateful. I've had some great positive support from the team, which is Pat, Jane and Sophie. And thanks to input from governors that have responded to a couple of calls for input so far. We've begun to shake out what we believe to be a reasonable process and priorities for the sorts of information that prospective and then elected or appointed governors need to be able to get up to speed quickly. There'll be plenty of opportunity for further input from governors as we go. And I would expect us to have the first draft of the sort of information that needs to go out to prospective nominees within the next couple of weeks. There is one statement on the report which is not quite accurate. We were expecting to have a meeting with the comms team by now, but illness has made that impossible, so it's been postponed till after this meeting. So as soon as we get anything more to say, we'll let you know.
Chris, thanks for your leadership in this. It's a great piece of work and very inclusive, so thank you. Any questions for Chris? Okay, I can't see any digital hands. Keep us briefed, Chris. So we move on to the Wayfinder project update report.
Yeah, well, there's not a great deal to report on except to make governors aware of what's going on. Every now and again, I go and have a little foray into local social media to say, I'm a governor at Swift. If you'd like to talk to me about anything at all, please do. And I was beginning to pick up a thread of patients and visitors that had been on site and for one reason or another were getting lost and anxious and all that sort of stuff. And I think it was you, Russell, that got me engaged with the team that's going on here. It's an existing working group, but has only just got going on the subject of navigation around the sites. So that's signposting and the information that any visitor would need to be able to find their way around. It involves estates and capital planning. It involves hotel services, patient access services and the like. Very interesting so far, exploratory, understanding standards, what's happening out there. And last week, we had the chance to see a couple of apps of digital ways of finding your way around a site, which is all very exciting stuff. So it's ongoing, and I'll report back when there's anything more concrete to say to you.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Any questions to Chris on the work on wayfinding? Fiona?
Yeah, just to add to that, so this month we are launching our Access Able information on our website, which is a function that we've purchased that allows a site map for each of the 4 hospitals to be put on our website that indicates where entry points are appropriate for people in either wheelchair or other ability or disability issues. So we're hoping that will really help in terms of accessibility for our less abled people. That is something that's used in the public sector and it's been successfully evaluated. So again, I'll let people know when that launches.
Thanks, Fiona. If I could, Russell, before you move on, just give you one little anecdote on this very subject. I had to come in for a blood test myself a couple of weeks ago. I do quite frequently. And of course, we've moved it nearer the front door of outpatients now. While I was sitting waiting my turn, at least 4 people walked straight past the big sign saying phlebotomy services to go to the help desk to say, I'm here for a blood test. Where do I go? When in fact, it was about 2 yards away from them. So getting the terminology right and consistent on appointment letters, maps, arrow signboards and goodness knows what is really, really key. And it comes down right to that nitty gritty stuff.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Chris, just on that point, and I'll come to you in a second, Pat, 1 in 8 adults in the UK are functionally illiterate. 7 million adults can't read and write. And it's beholden on us to help them navigate their way around the hospital when that's a reality of their experience. I do want to move us on, but quickly, Pat.
I'd just like to say quickly how difficult it is. I take my husband to the hospital regularly and he's in a wheelchair, and the knobbly pavements and slopes, which are supposed to be slopes but actually are a little step, are like climbing a mountain for me.
Yeah.
So any direction as to how to avoid anything like that would be so welcome. Thank you.
No, great point, Pat. Thank you. And Ruth?
I'd just like to say to Chris, to add to his induction of new governors, quite a session on health service lingo, all those words that are used in the National Health Service. I think governors will find a little bewildering, and it might be quite good to have a week on that.
But I've been on this gig in different places for over 12 years, Ruth. I think it'll take more than a week. The point is very well made. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, colleagues. So we will move on then to the Safer Discharge Group update. You mentioned this a bit earlier, Jean. Is there anything you want to add?
Yes, I'll try and be quick. I just want to say how impressive. I've watched it develop and grow both in the patient safety surveillance and in the safer discharge group, and to congratulate Becky Moore and all the team. They're really going into everything in fine detail. So TTOs are always discussed and always perceived as a problem. In fact, they've really got to grips with it, if you ever do, totally. But at the moment, there's a lot of staff off sick in pharmacy, so they're prioritising TTOs. They've brought in a new tear-off slip for the wards, and that's been trialled, and that's very successful. The physios and OTs think it's an excellent move. The nursing, and if I get the titles wrong, Fiona, I'm sorry, the nursing booklet that they use, that's got to be revamped to include the new information that's on the tear-off, but they won't be able to do it straight away because you've got quite a lot in cupboards and they don't want to waste money and throw them away. They're introducing, or it has been introduced, a new walk round in order to manage the beds right time, right place, as efficiently as properly as possible. Every morning there should be a senior clinical walk round, and they're going to do an audit to check. They think it's happening, and they're assuming it's happening, but they're going to do an audit to double check that it really is. I've heard that the board ward have got October as discharge month, and I offered yesterday at the meeting yesterday that the fire service take home, hospital to home, will offer an invite, which I've confirmed to her this morning, to say that if any of the board members want to go out with the team during October, then we will accommodate them, assuming the patient gives permission. But I think that they would find that really enlightening, because it's the hidden Cinderella service that the hospital couldn't really manage without. In terms of when they look at things like, they use the example of insulin in the community, and that it looked like there was a problem. In fact, when they looked into it and did an audit, they found that it was 0.04 in terms of discharge in the number of people who had actually experienced a problem. So when you think something is highlighted, but when you actually do audits and look into it properly, they're also using, trying to introduce a system that everybody uses for, so for example, the Patients Forum are doing home checks, a fabulous job of ringing people and contacting people who've been discharged recently to get feedback. They were doing that ad hoc and randomly. They've now been introduced to a system that everybody's going to use, including PALS, so you've got some uniformity in feedback. I won't go on, but I just want to tell you that you can't believe how much work is going on, both in the Patient Surveillance Committee and in the Safer Discharge Committee, and it's really excellent. And I can't do anything but give you complete assurance. It's just wonderful.
Thank you, Jean, and thank you for your hard work and passion. Any questions to Jean? Ruth, is that a legacy hand? Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Mary?
Just following on to the TTO issue, I had a conversation with the deputy head of pharmacy recently, and the pharmacy has had some challenges around vacancies and recruitments, such that they haven't been able to provide perhaps the whole service that they would like to provide. So I think we have to just hope that they can fill their gaps soon.
No, thank you, Mary. If I can just ask colleagues to take legacy hands down, it's just a bit confusing for me. So Ruth, did you want to make another point, or is that a legacy hand? Okie dokie. So
sorry, sorry.
So Ruth, did you want to say something?
No, just sorry.
Okay. So cantering on, the place plan update. Anne.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Meg kindly circulated the board director a presentation that went to Board of Directors workshop on the 1st of September, and that just provides an overview of the review that we've undertaken with internal audit, the work on our future governance and how we strengthen that, really to deliver across 3 principles around how we remove duplication. At the moment, we've got a group, Healthy Citizens, that Chris Elliott, the Chief Executive of Warwick District Council, is leading, and myself, Place Partnership. So we're looking at how we can streamline that. And it was great that Chris was able to join our board director conversation, and we also took the opportunity to really talk through, you know, what the trust, why the trust wants to be part of the Place Partnership, and our gives and our gets and our asks, really repeating some of the conversations that we had at a Place workshop on the 26th of June. Chris is providing an update to the Health and Wellbeing Board on Place updates, and there's a lot of rich detail in there in terms of updates around the work we're doing around respiratory health and inequality, the work that we're doing around our COVID-19 recovery and prevention of illness, the work that's happening collaboratively around the environment and sustainability, mental health and suicide and bereavement, and children and young people. It's really wonderful to see South Warwickshire Place flourish in the way that it is, and the partnerships that are coming together. On the 2nd of September, we had issued through NHS E&I their work, and they actually observed some of the work that we did at South Warwickshire Place, and so I like to think we helped shape some of this. So it's called Thriving Places, Guidance on the Development of Place-Based Partnership as part of the statutory ICS, the Integrated Care System, and that's published alongside Delivering Together for Residents. And it sets out sort of the potential that exists within collaborative working within the populations we live, the populations we work in. We have taken opportunity as part of our work in South Warwickshire Place to look at externally, particularly to Wigan. Wigan keeps coming up again as a really strong example of where collaboration across statutory organisations, the voluntary sector and people. And I've just been reminded that of some of their achievements, you know, life expectancy increasing by 7 years within the most deprived communities, and seeing a reduction in looked after children by 10%. And we need to get energised really around place. Place seems like a very sterile word. And when we were speaking to Wigan, they were like, well, you know, South Warwickshire, you have amazing history, amazing infrastructure, the birthplace of Shakespeare, you know, your industry. And so we are going to look we're working with Warwickshire County Council's Culture and Heritage Officer, and starting to think through, you know, how do we get our communities energised by the work that's happening and involved, and so that we do truly realise the ambitions in delivering together for our residents. And so we're going to capture the outputs of the different workshops, putting that together as a communication. And that was something that was very keen that came out of the Board of Directors workshop, and also really there's some really good pieces of work to share with the board, with colleagues, with governors, and more importantly with people who make up South Warwickshire Place. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Just a couple of points I'd add before I go to general questions. Some colleagues may wonder, why all this focus on place? You know, we've got the hospital, we've got our community works. Why are you so focused on place? And at its simplest, if you take demand into the hospital, unless we do a better job as a healthcare system at helping people to help themselves to live longer, happier, healthier lives, we will never be able to cope with the increase in demand because of the ageing demographic. There will be too many people turning up at the front door for us to cope with. Equally, unless we do an awful lot more at place with our social care colleagues, we will never be able to get people out of the hospital to their home, whether that's a care home or their own home, fast enough to stop bed blocking. So all the work at place is important for our citizens to allow them to have longer, happier, healthier lives. But there's also a really important selfish reason for us as a trust, because unless we're more effective at place, we can't run the hospital in the community teams in the way we need to future-proof them. So when sometimes you're hearing all of this buzz and phrasing of place, that's why we're doing it. So any questions or perspectives? Jean?
I'm a big fan of place, but if you just look at the vaccine uptake across the communities, then we must be really careful not to sit on our laurels, but how well we are doing, in all truth. But you've only got to look at the uptake to see less than 50% in Hillfields in Coventry, and the rates across Rugby and North Warwickshire, 92% in South Warwickshire uptake. So you've only got to look at that to see that we've got a huge job to do in engaging with people who are not engaging with the statutory type bodies. So Anne's doing a brilliant job, but we've got to make sure that it's not just the temples and gurdwaras, that the little places where people eat and meet, that we engage with them, please.
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons why I loved Ruth's drop-in idea earlier. Okay, team, shall we move on then? Thank you, Anne, for that update, and thank you for your hard work. I think Joe's asked you a question in the chat box. The General Purposes Committee meeting on the 8th of July. Mary, anything you'd like to add to this?
Well, because of the nature of the General Purposes Committee, a lot of the items that we discussed there are covered on the agenda at the Council anyway. So a lot of the issues that have been mentioned previously, the demonstration of the patient portal has now been arranged for the November Council of Governors meeting. And the two significant initiatives were approved, which you've heard about, which is the Induction Working Group and the Wayfinder Project. I wanted to add that I've been attending the Medicine Safety Committee and observing the Drug and Therapeutics Committee, and I've been impressed at the volume and scope of work and the quality of the content, especially the Drug and Therapeutics Committee, but they're both excellent groups, which I don't think Governors has had any insight of before, but I was very impressed. We're now going to, as I said earlier, organise the external auditors, Ian or one of his colleagues, to come and talk to us. And any Governors that missed the pre-meeting, I want to reinforce what Russell was saying about locality teams of Governors being encouraged to form an informal group to chat to each other, particularly when you've got a mix of older and newer Governors. We find that useful in Stratford. And to stress yet again the importance of Governors, whenever they possibly can, to attend the NEDS coffee sessions. The NEDS, they're so poorly attended, but the NEDS give their time, and I personally find them really helpful. So that's another little push for those. But otherwise, I just take the minutes as read.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions or perspectives to Mary on the GPC?
I suppose I perhaps should add one other thing, Russell, that since the membership ceased and it came under the remit of the General Purposes Committee, that combined with the COVID effects, there hasn't been much activity around membership, and there are discussions going on about finding new ways of working and new ways of communicating, and also Governors working within the place teams. And at the appropriate time that they're going to ask Governors, and I think we've already got Chris and Roger interested in working in that environment, but we're hoping to move forward with more Governor activity around the place space system.
No, thank you, Mary. And if you can just check the chat box, and Roger, and then we'll move on. Just conscious of time.
Yes, just to mention again the Mary's comment about Ned coffee mornings. September 20th, 12 noon is the next one. Rosemary and Yasmin are up to play for that one. No, come and join us. It gets a bit lonely when there's only two governors to two Neds.
Yeah, just keeping things moving, guys, because we've still got quite a lot to cover, but thank you. So we're then on to the Patient Care Committee meeting on the 4th of May. Richard?
Thank you, Russell. Yes, in fact, actually, we've had two patient care committees since the last Council of Governors. We were actually due to have one on Monday, but due to apologies, we decided to postpone that one. Fortunately, Mary and Jean have covered actually much of what I was going to say, so I won't repeat that. At the last meeting, the July meeting, we did express concerns about children's being admitted with mental health problems, and that seems to be something of a national problem. One of the issues which I raised at that meeting, which I think is quite interesting, is if you remember, well before the pandemic, we had an appointments working group, and of course, as part of that, we were looking at whether patients wanted to have remote appointments. Well, of course, during the pandemic, most of the outpatients appointments have been remote. And looking at patient experience, it looks like that is not being detrimental to patient experience. And looking at things like DNA, and perhaps we can have figures of did not attend, but certainly from what I've seen at Clinical Governance Committee, that hasn't been badly impacted by remote appointments as well. So I've raised at the Patient Care Committee that perhaps this is something we should be looking at, and perhaps continuing after the pandemic, and particularly giving patients the choice of being able to have remote appointments if they want to. It may make the car part extension redundant if all the patients are going to be staying at home. The digital hub has been mentioned, so I should also mention that actually I've got a meeting on Friday with diabetes care at the digital hub. It's a remote meeting, so that will be interesting. I'll report back to the Patient Care Committee about what was said at that meeting. It's also useful to point out that the Patient Forum, as Jean mentioned, do welfare calls. So I wanted actually to specifically give the gratitude of the committee for the work of the Patient Forum, because they have worked very hard during the last few months, actually getting in contact with patients and seeing how the comments the patients have had. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Roger. And I do think, we sort of touched on it earlier, how can governors reach out to their constituents, not just families and friends. That work of the Patient Forum, I think, is an example of how to reach out. Questions or perspectives, Alan?
Yeah, just a quick one on if people are saying that they're happy or happier to have remote consultations, is that having an impact on our A&E turnouts? Do people actually turn up to A&E instead?
Well, the point I was making at the committee was we don't actually know, because we haven't actually asked them yet. That was going to be work before the pandemic, but the pandemic came in. So I would like to see whether patients are happy to have remote. But as in A&E, well, that's perhaps Fiona or Glenn could answer on that.
Glenn?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to measure really and to identify a completely causal link between the two issues. But I mean, there is no doubt that some individuals prefer face-to-face, and whether it's our appointments or primary care appointments, that there is an indication that some of those individuals will then appear at A&E as a consequence of feeling shortchanged by that process. So we do need to make sure that it's not kind of one size fits all approach, that if people require face-to-face, and we've got the flexibility to do that where there is need. So quite a bit of the criticism of primary care that's out there in the media is a perception rather than a reality, and they are working quite hard to offer both face-to-face and digital, but patients are reading the paper and they're just turning up in A&E.
And finally, Pat, and then we'll move on.
Yes, just quickly to say, it's really about the A&E and people turning up at A&E. I had to call 111 the other night, and I was holding on for 3/4 of an hour. And I feel that a lot of people might have given up and just, if they could have done, gone to A&E. Yeah. Is there something perhaps we should look at with 111? But I may be a bit...
Yeah, put simply, yes. I mean, 111 was a rapidly introduced solution, and we are continuing to refine it, including the ability to route patients directly into some of our same-day emergency care services rather than via A&E. So it's maturing, but there are some concerns about their ability to actually manage the calls with clinicians rather than administrative robots. So we're working closely with West Midlands Ambulance Service, who are leading on that.
Yeah. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Pat, and apologies for your experience on behalf of the NHS. So moving on then, and keeping the pace going, the Business Oversight Committee, Mike.
Thanks, Russell. So the minutes have been issued. You can see the areas that we probed into with Simon and Rosemary. An overall significant reassurance was gained from the meeting. The most pleasing aspect really was that the trust staff are really willing to look at themselves and their processes critically, and to raise matters where performance could or should be improved. The only other comment really is that there's an action on there for me that I don't think it's quite worded correctly. What it's about is how the Business Oversight Committee can get assurance rather than reassurance, and you get assurance through seeing detail, and then pass that back on and give assurance to the other governors in a scenario like this. That action is still with me, because obviously what we don't want to do is to all turn up and attend the actual detailed meetings. So there's a challenge and a balance there. But I would encourage governors to attend both the audit and the NEDS F&P as observers. And if they see anything they'd like us to raise at Business Oversight, please do.
Okay, many thanks, Mike. Any questions to Mike? Can't see any hands raised. Thank you for your hard work, Mike. So we move on then to the report and resignation and appointment of governors. Meg?
Happy to take the report as read, Russell.
Okay, but John has obviously resigned, which is important to note. Any questions on the report on resignation and appointment of governors? Can't see any hands raised, so we then move on to non-executive director reappointments. Roger?
Thank you. Yes, get off mute. This is fairly straightforward, as has already been mentioned. I think Rosemary Hyde has one more year left in her available term, but in view of the impending resignation of two of the NEDs, the committee considered and decided to recommend to council that the two NEDs who are up on the end of their 6-year period, which would normally be an annual renewal, the committee felt that it would be appropriate to offer a 3-year renewal, because we want these NEDs to stay. We value their involvement, we value their expertise and their comments. As it will be heard in the confidential section, everyone thinks they're doing a good job. So I would ask for council to approve the reappointment of Rosemary for 1 year and Simon and Sue for 3 years apiece.
Thank you very much, Roger. Any questions or perspectives from colleagues? Please raise a digital hand if you are not happy to support the committee's recommendations. Okay, unanimously approved. Thank you very much, Roger, and thank you, Rosemary, Simon, and Sue. So I think then, colleagues, we're on to any other business. Please raise a digital hand if you've got any other business. Mary?
So I should have mentioned it sooner under Roger's item that it was considered this was a not a change of policy, but it was a one-off decision because of the circumstances around needing a bit more continuity on the board if we're going to have at least 2 new NEDs coming along, or maybe 3. So it was just a pragmatic solution, really, to the circumstances we found ourselves in.
Duly minuted. Thank you, Mary. Any other business? Okay, I can't see any other business. I assume that's a legacy hand, Mary. Any questions from governors? And any questions from members of the public? Meg, I'm unaware of any. Are you aware of any?
No, I haven't had any submitted. Thanks, Russell.
Okay, it is one of the things we miss digitally is seeing members of the public physically with us, because we used to have good attendances. Okay, well, thank you. We will therefore come to a conclusion of this meeting. Can I suggest we have a 7-minute break, get back together again at 5 to 4 for the confidential meeting, so we keep things going. So see you in about 7 minutes. Thank you. So I should make that clear. We're on a different invite for that meeting.